Hi, Mons.
Hi.
Thank you for agreeing to do this with me. So, we've been friends for a very long time. We've been through a lot together in terms of, not together in the same countries, but the same changes. You know, we're building businesses together. I've had a baby. We've both moved countries a lot. So we go through quite a lot. And you've changed your career completely, like built it from the ground upwards, building your business, which is incredible. And that's a whole story in itself. Like, we're not going to go into that because we'll be here all day in terms of figuring that out. But I don't think you know that I've taken like these little nuggets of wisdom that you've given me from your journey of your career path and building your business. And that's actually been really like life-changing for me and inspirational. And now you've gone on the journey and you're an ICF accredited women's empowerment coach. And I want to be here with you today so you can discuss that, and maybe other women might find little nuggets of information that will help empower them and move them on. So I want to start by asking you, what is a women's empowerment coach? What does that entail?
Yeah, so in terms of coaching, I work on the personal development side of coaching, and I work predominantly with women. And it's essentially about supporting women to be the most empowered version of themselves. And that for me is like 3 areas that I work on mainly. So one is doing the deep internal work. So understanding your limiting beliefs, your past, your wound, your triggers, so that we can master those and they're not controlling our lives.
Yeah.
And then secondly, really knowing who you are, like authentically who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, and then feeling really confident to express that, to fully own that. And then the third area is what I call living with intentionality. And this is, once you know who you are really authentically, it's building the life that's actually right for you. Because so many people are living lives that aren't really quite what they want, but they don't have the courage or the knowledge or know themselves well enough to actually go out and make that life a reality, or even feel empowered enough that they can do that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, to try and explain it in a nutshell, which is hard.
That is the nutshell. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Those are the kind of 3 main areas. I do work with some men, but it is predominantly women at this stage.
You talk about masculine and feminine energetics a lot. When I first heard you say that, I was really naive and I was like, yeah, it's male and female, because that's naturally, I think, what you start thinking what that is. But then you explained it to me and I was like, wow, that's like really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me a little bit about that, masculine and feminine, how it's not just about being male and female?
Yeah, for sure. So the easiest way to think about it is like yin and yang. So it's the idea that there's 2 kind of opposing forces in the world, everywhere, externally and within us, and that they're kind of opposing opposites, but together they create balance. So the masculine is more like the yang, which I think most people will be more like familiar with.
Yeah.
As in the concept of yin and yang, I mean. So the masculine is more about things like structure, consistency, resilience, pushing through. It's more kind of linear, it's efficient, it's like what's the best way from A to B.
Yeah.
And then the feminine is more about flow and ease and softness and feelings and intuition and space. So you can see how they're really, really different.
Yeah.
So really this is just like qualities that exist in the world and also within us. So men naturally, most of the time, but it's obviously a generalization, are a little bit more comfortable in the masculine qualities.
Yeah.
And women are a little bit more comfortable in the feminine qualities. But we have both within us. And part of what I work with, or my belief, is to be really empowered men or women. We need to have this like beautiful balance of the 2, and know when to pull on, when to draw on each one. Otherwise we start projecting it outwards and looking for it outwards, or one gets out of balance, and that's when we become to something like in excess in some way. So my work with women is really, and men when I work with men, is looking at this within themselves and seeing where there might be a little bit of like a lost connection or imbalance, or 2 in one, or the other.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. In terms of those energies, how does that then go into business?
I think the way that we've done business for quite a long time has been very masculine.
Yeah.
And I think we're now seeing, well, there's more women in business for a start, but there's a lot of women in business acting like men also, I just want to say. Which is what I mean. Not all women bring the feminine qualities. You
Yeah.
sometimes find men who do. But yeah, we've been doing business in a really masculine way. And I think now things are starting to change and we're seeing more feminine qualities in business.
Yeah.
And what that looks like is moving from a really kind of constricted, rigid paradigm of like the 9 to 5, you've got to be in the office. This is what we do Mondays. This is what we do Tuesdays. You've got to be there every second of that time to... remote working, to fluid hours and things like that, and more well-being being thought of as part of the workplace. But yeah, bringing more feminine in is also about, the feminine is the creative aspect also. So it's like creating more space for creativity and leading sometimes from intuition, not always from logic, things like that.
The famous gut feeling.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah,
what was your question?
About masculine and feminine energetics within business.
Yeah.
But that also leads me on to, you mentioned something to me when we were running through this actually, about women doing business based on their menstrual cycle, which I've heard it when it comes to fitness. So when people are like, menstruating, they won't go and do exercise, it's too heavy, it's more like yoga and breath work and things like that. But I've not heard it for business. I just find that really interesting. Like, have you got friends that are currently doing that and practicing that?
I do, but in the sense that a lot of my friends are also coaches. We're essentially, we work with clients, but we're working for ourselves, and we can make our own rules a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
But it's more something that I think is going to be the future, or something to really think about. I'm not really seeing that I know of any big companies doing that. It's like it's more of a question like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
And the point is, because some people watching might be like, what do you mean? But when we say we're living in quite masculine structures and masculine workplaces, what I mean is, like, for example, men on a physiological level, their hormones are pretty much the same every single day.
Yeah.
While as women, we're cyclical. Like, between puberty and menopause, we're going through a cycle every month, or most women are. Or even if you're not actually menstruating, you're hormonally going through these cycles.
Yeah.
And so every week of that cycle, we're feeling different things. And there's an amazing book called Wild Power, which actually explains how every part of that process, you've got a different superpower.
Yeah, right.
So, for example, when we're bleeding as women, we're more introverted and we need a bit more like time to ourselves and things like that. It's not the time to be like, bam, 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 I've got 10 meetings today.
Yeah.
But we're extremely intuitive. So if there's a big decision kind of looming, that might be a time when you get like a real guidance from your body, like, oh, this is what we're meant to, like, this is what feels like the best thing to do.
Yeah.
And then it's like you were saying with the exercise, when we're in ovulation, that's when we're like, right, that's when you can have 10 meetings a day, or you might want to birth a new project, or for me, I might want to launch a new program, something that's really like, I need a lot of energy for, that's when that's going to work really well.
Yeah.
So I think it's just an interesting thing to look at, like, how do we, rather than like shame women for having these different, cycles, these different parts of their month, it's like, how do we work with that? And how do we work with women's power in that? And you to like harness that power.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really interesting thing for maybe companies to explore.
I think so as well. Definitely as a woman, you feel like, you can feel it in yourself that you're going through these cycles. And there's days where you just like, I just want to be in bed and I just need to lay down. But you push through. But that's always been the mentality, isn't it? That you just push through. And I guess that does come from like a masculine place, right? Because
that's it, yeah.
They don't go through the same hormonal cycles that we have.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. But it's like, how do you almost like commercialize that and make that part of a big corporation that's already got the grounds for like the typical way of working? It actually sounds a bit mind-boggling about unpicking that. How do we do that?
But maybe it starts with women like getting to know their cycles again and embracing that themselves and standing for that, and men maybe educating themselves on that. Yeah. And so there's more awareness to start with.
Yeah, hence why we're talking about it. Why do you feel like women need to feel empowered in today's world? Like, why is it so important for us to feel empowered?
Well, I think everyone needs to feel empowered and be able to tune into themselves and know their own truth. I think it's when we're blindly following a status quo or something we're told without really questioning it and being discerning that we get into trouble as humans. Yeah. But in terms of more broadly, like for women, just bringing it back to the masculine, feminine energetics, like if we're in a world where women aren't feeling empowered and, for quite a long time, men have felt more empowered, let's say, then we get into like a really out of balance place where the masculine goes into this kind of hyper, it goes into like extreme, it goes out of balance, and then we're missing certain qualities. So for example, like the extreme of resilience, which is a beautiful, healthy quality, if that goes into extreme and isn't balanced, it could lead to like ruthlessness. Or that kind of more individualistic quality of the masculine, if that goes into extreme again, you've got dictatorship. So when women are empowered and the feminine is empowered, we can bring in, it's the qualities of like collaboration, of like flat structures, of always thinking about the well-being of the whole, of making decisions from the heart. Like these are all things that we really could do with more of in the world. So really it's for, we all want women and men to be empowered to live in a better place because we want that balance.
And it's kind of gone off balance, but
I think it definitely has. I also think men are getting a really bad rap also, and I want to make sure that, like, I personally don't go into that space. We want healthy balance of both.
And that's what's important.
And it is changing. It is changing. We can see that, but there's still
some way to go. So you talk a lot about radical authenticity. You've explained that a little bit to me, what that means, but for people who are watching, what does that mean to you, and what does that mean when you're talking to women and coaching women about that?
So I guess to just bring it back, like authenticity is obviously being true to yourself and just showing up as your true you. And I think the radical for me is just taking that to another level, like so to the stage where you really know your boundaries, you're not afraid to speak your truth. Even if it's going to cause a bit of conflict or if it's going to be a bit awkward. So it's kind of like the opposite of people pleasing, which is such a common problem with everyone, but also it seems to be really ingrained with women. So the radical for me is really, it's something like a term that I've taken from Burning Man, 10 Commandments, which I really liked, but it really means just taking it to another level and being so committed to being in your truth and standing up for who you are, and having that courage to do that even when it's going to displease someone, or it's going to feel a bit awkward, or it may mean that you don't end up getting something you want, but you're just committed to being really true to you. That's one of the nuggets of wisdom that you gave to me, because I know that it was something even yourself was trying to do, right? Like, it's not something that you learn. You don't go, oh, I know how to do this now. You have to keep constantly checking yourself on a daily basis, because naturally, inherently, for me in particular, I go to stand up for myself, and I do, and I feel really proud of myself, but then the next day I feel like I haven't got the energy to do that again because it doesn't feel natural. Right. So it's rethinking how that works in your brain, right? And not feeling awkward, like I am renowned for avoiding any conflict or anything like that, and I've had to go, no, I need to stand up for myself. I have to have the confidence to speak and say what I'm doing, even for the other person, because they don't know if I'm not being true, and if I'm not being true, they are not getting a version of me that's true, and then they're like, they're confused when I say something out of the blue, but it's something that I've always had in me, but I've just not said it out loud. Exactly. It can be confusing for people, I guess. If you don't live by it. And if I guess if you're also, it sounds like if we've got a pattern of being a certain way, like people pleasing and all of those things, once we try and start changing that, people get a little bit shocked. They're like, who are you? You said no. Right. And we have normalised, especially like in British culture, we're kind of like famous for it, right? Like there's other cultures that are a little bit more direct. Which is interesting, because when you come across that, you're like, whoa. Well, for example, Barcelona, like you live between Barcelona and Ibiza, but for me, Barcelona is definitely, I don't know, as an English person living here, you're a little bit like, oh, but then you're like, oh no, you're allowed to say what you think and just get it done, and it doesn't have to be nicetised all the time. Exactly, and it's about, like you said, you're not taught this. I mean, I think we should be getting taught this stuff. Like some of the stuff that I work with women on is really what I think should be taught to young girls in school. But it's also about normalizing that behavior. So I mean, I've got a friend that always comes to mind because she's so direct and she always speaks her truth. And I remember when I first met her, I was like, wow. You're like, great. Because we're just so conditioned. This is like one of the ways women in particular are conditioned to be the nice girl. But after a while, I was like, it actually gave me permission to do that too. And it's so liberating. And also, she's one of the friends I will never worry about asking her something, a favour or whatever, because I know she's going to tell me the truth. And it's actually such a feeling of safety. It's such a it's actually such a beautiful thing, and it builds intimacy in relationships. It's the opposite of what we think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really big one, people pleasing. And I think there's almost like some people wear it like a badge, but it's actually kind of it's a subtle trauma response.
Yeah.
I really would like to also just like debunk that myth. Like, it really isn't something that's good. We want to be nice and kind, but people pleasing is not a healthy way to conduct yourself.
It's not confidence, is it? Because if you're doing it because you want to do it, then great, but I think a lot of the time you're inherently doing it because you want somebody to be like, thank you for doing that, and get sort of like the reward from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm definitely can be a people pleaser, but I am trying to work on it because I've heard you talk about your coaching and this kind of stuff, and like talking to you, which is why we're doing this. Is like, I think people need to know about that. I think it's really helpful. You talk about the feminine archetypes, which I had no idea there were so many of them. So I guess that's the reason why you do talk about them, right? You were saying to me how there are a lot of archetypes. Was it like 12 you were saying, or is there an exact number, or is it just...
Yeah, I mean, the initial work was by Carl Jung, and I think he came up with 12, but it really like they're infinite, really. And there's like 7 key ones that I work with. But, yeah.
Okay, well, what are they? Like, which ones are they? Which are your favourite ones to talk about? Which ones do we use the most in life, you know? Well, I think that you know of, obviously. You've read and studied stuff like this, but yeah, what do you use in your coaching? Like, how do you talk about it with the people that you're coaching?
Right, yeah. So I think just to like go back a step with the archetypes, it's like, say there's 7, but it's like multiple ways that we can show up as women. So it's different energies we can embody. And the idea is that these are quite present in the collective psyche. It's something we like inherently know. It's not something that's taught to us.
Right.
And for me, it's actually being able to connect to all of those and express all of those in your unique way, that's part of being an empowered woman. But what's kind of happened is that we're like familiar with some, and they've been really championed, like the mother and the maiden is like every princess in a Disney movie, and the mother obviously is like probably the most famous archetype in humanity. But there's others that have become really repressed and that we don't really connect to as women anymore. So that's a lot of the work that I do. So there's like the wild woman archetype, the lover in particular, that we're a little bit disconnected from. So they're probably my favourites to answer your question in terms of, I see the most liberation in women when we look at those. But it really depends on the individual, because you might actually be really disconnected from other parts of yourself. But it's all about embracing all parts of who you are as a woman, and not just like a slither of what society's told you is what you're meant to be representing, how you're meant to be showing up. Right.
So for example, the wild woman, I think that one's a bit out there, isn't it? I know
it says it in the name, though.
Yeah, how do we break that? But what, like, obviously without scaring people, because if you've not like done this before or heard about this before, you're a bit like, oh. But is there any examples of that? Oh, hi, Polly.
Hello.
Here, the wild woman. She showed herself. She showed herself as Cat.
So sorry, examples.
Yeah, of like anyone that you can talk about. You don't obviously name names. Any women that you've coached where you've brought out a wild woman in them, and what does that look like?
Yeah, right, okay. So firstly to say, there's elements of this in everybody, just like there's masculine and feminine in everybody, so it's in everybody. In terms of someone to talk about, the thing about the wild woman is she's just not really represented in films and in our popular culture, because it's been really shamed. The thing that always comes to mind for me is like women like a few hundred years ago, if they were displaying signs of like connection to spirituality or not conforming to rules or things like that, they were branded as witches and they were burned. So this is actually like, it's really serious how this has been repressed out of our culture and what we know. But to be like more specific about a wild woman energy, this is like the part of you that doesn't care what people think at all. She doesn't care what she's meant to look like as a woman. She's the woman who's not shaving her armpits, not shaving her legs. She's definitely connected to her sexuality and uninhibited. She's just untamed. She's not been, the conditioning hasn't worked on her. She does what she believes is right. She's quite fierce. She's definitely not, she's definitely very comfortable being, say, naked. So yeah, she's just an uninhibited, untamed part of us that a lot of us have squashed down. And the other element of the wild woman, because she's sometimes called the mystic, is connection to something spiritual or something more than the material world. And I think that's the part of the wild woman that's been really feared in the past.
People don't understand it,
right? And even now there might be people watching that and being like, what does that mean for me? But if you think about it, even connection to your intuition, that's part of the wild woman,
right?
And like,
so it's not as scary as people think.
Like, that's what I mean, that she's part of us all. And like, that has also been a little bit like shamed, because we've championed logic a lot in the modern world, but
it's because you can make sense of it.
Ever been wrong?
Well,
so it's coming back to trusting that. What did you say?
Who knows? Maybe it has been wrong at times, but then we've learnt lessons. So that's fine. So wild woman allows us to learn lessons sometimes too. I find it super interesting knowing there's all these different things that have been repressed. And I guess there's a lot of women that probably do have these little feelings as well, right? And they just don't talk about them to anyone and probably keep them inside their own head, knowing that, because it's been sort of almost shamed to be that kind of person. Yeah. But there are a lot of women who are now exercising that type of attitude, which is great, and this is why we want to keep talking about it, right? So people are aware of it and understand that it's not weird and we shouldn't be burned at the stakes.
And it's also as simple as, actually, one I forgot is like a connection to nature, which is something I think we really feel as well. So it doesn't have to be like out there and scary. It's just these like more natural thing. Yeah, like we all feel this. So it's just not ignoring that. It's like nurturing that, and where can that go if we actually put energy into that? If we're not just, focusing on being the nice girl and all these other things. What positive effects have you seen as the result of your coaching? I know we talked about this, but you did give me some great answers of like what people are doing now. And have you got any examples that you want to share? No, we were just laughing because it feels a bit like a pitch. No, I mean, definitely the main thing that I see after working with women, and especially in the group program that I run, is that I just see a change even in their faces. Like, they just are more comfortable in their own skin, and they're just more proud of who they are, and they're just owning it. Like, things they might have thought before a little bit like strange about them or weird, like they're just fully embracing it and being uniquely them. And there's nothing more beautiful than seeing people being like really uniquely themselves.
Do you think, obviously they have this experience with you, and then they're set back out into the world with these like new tools and their strategies and things like that? How do you constantly keep up that feeling without coming back to you or whatever? Like, how do you do that? Because obviously when you're all together in a group, you're all doing the same thing, so you feel like it's a safe space, right? And then you've got to go out and practice that in the world. Like, do you have follow-ups with them, or give them certain tools to take into the world? Sounds like we're going into the big scary world, but do you know what I mean? Like, do you have to keep on like exercising that to remember that?
Yeah, I think for sure. And I think when you go back into like, depends what the life is like that you're living, but it can be really different to what you've experienced in that group with women. So for example, well, actually both my one-to-one programs and my group coaching, like the whole first section, like 5 or 6 weeks, is learning tools and practices. So when the like trigger moments come up and things like that you know what to do. So there's definitely like a lot of practices and tools and self-care that needs to be implemented afterwards. And I do also do follow-ups, so if that support is like needed later, we can check back in, and you can do quite a lot in a check-in when you've done a lot of upfront work together.
Okay. What I wanted to know is, obviously you're giving these women all these tools to go out, feel empowered, almost like changing what maybe friends, family and partners would expect this person to be. How have you found that that's affected their relationships?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And one of the things that is true is that, like, as we change and evolve and grow, sometimes our relationships need to change, and sometimes it doesn't quite work for us anymore. But I have definitely found as well that when we do the really deep work, which I spend so much time doing with all my clients, of really knowing what triggers you, really knowing like your negative patterns, learning your boundaries, knowing how to express yourself, this can really improve relationships. Like I've really seen a certain client I'm thinking of now who's just really improved her relationship with her partner. So it might be a little bit like, whoa, at first, but if they're on board, and then sometimes it stimulates them, I'm thinking of a romantic partner, but it could also be friendships, to step up a bit themselves and learn those things too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And in terms of like physically, what have they done? What's been like the positive outcomes? Like in business, in, you know, things that they've always wanted to do and they never got around to doing it. What the experience there with people?
Yeah, that's such a big part of what I do, and it's something I'm really passionate about, which is like really creating the life that works for you. And the whole reason we do the work of like getting to know all the archetypes and all of that is so that from that foundation you can then ask, am I living the right life for me, and what does my life want to look like? Yeah. So I do see, my clients, once we've done that work, they really start to question that and think like, what do I want my life to look like? And empowering themselves to build the life they really want. So I've had women starting their own businesses. Wow. After doing the coaching program, I've had like a mother of 5 who's finally started like her own passion, like making candles and selling those. I've had people who have finally moved to the country that they want to move to. So really just like taking life back into their own hands and starting to shift that the way they want it to go.
Yeah, literally empowering women. Exactly what you say you do. That's really cool. You can hear the cat scrounging around the background. That's fine. What would you say is like the most, what would seem strange to an outsider that you do within your course? Like, I don't know. I've not done your course, so I don't know. But like, is there anything that where even the people who have came into the course, obviously you tell them what you're going to be doing, right? But is there anything where they're like, I wasn't expecting to be doing this? Is there anything in there that's a bit of a wild card?
A bit of a wild card.
Yeah. Not a wild card, but, you know, testing for people because it doesn't feel natural.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of kind of like learning and kind of standard stuff in my programs. In the group work, there's always like exercises, and people like, I give people a task about having to speak their truth to a partner, and it's like really like they feel really awkward. Yeah. But yeah, in my group program in particular, there's 1 week where I've invited in an embodiment facilitator. So she works specifically with movement. Oh, cool. And we use that whole session just to channel one of the archetypes, but in our bodies, because that's such a big part of like integrating something. It's not just about using the mind. Yeah. So we did a wild woman like activation during my program. So this was like the women came in their lingerie and whatever they felt really expressed in, actually. Yeah. And there was like different movement practices that were they could be quite sexy, but at times they were just meant to be quite like out there. Yeah.
Was this all online as well? So
this was all on Zoom. Yeah, this was all on Zoom. But honestly, like every woman was just like glowing at the end.
Even thinking about doing it, I'm like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it is really empowering, and I think if something feels a bit edgy, once you cross to the other side,
you're like, nothing feels
right.
Bad
Yeah,
anymore.
You feel empowered and you feel liberated. So.
All right, let's go get a laundry on.
Part 2 of this interview.
Well, look, I've covered a lot of our questions, and you're probably really thirsty now. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I am going to put like links to your website and your Instagram and stuff. But if people do want to get in touch with you, like, how's best possible to do that?
Yeah, it's probably going to be on my Instagram, which is Monica Amy, AIMIE. Yeah. That's my handle, and you can find everything on there. Cool. It's Monica with a K .Amy.
We'll just link it. It's getting complicated.
Yeah, you can message me on there.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.